At this point, you're either getting tired of us or you're surprised that we're making them this fast. This is Deep Dive with Dano. I'm Dano. Welcome to the show. Well, holy smokes, we've making another episode. I got Joel back with me.
Round 3, baby. Let's go.
Round 3. At this point, if he keeps it up, we might have to change the name of the show.
Hey. Whoa.
Is there copyright issues with that? I don't know. I'm not copyrighting any of this.
I was going to say.
Steal it if you want.
If you want to steal it, it's okay.
I mean, there's only 8 of you listening, so
hey.
I mean, we got to start somewhere, right?
Got to start somewhere. It always starts somewhere.
Hey, listen, the last episode, if you listened, we asked you to take a poll. It was a simple yes or no.
Yes.
4 people answered. 2 of them were Joel and myself. So 2 of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's probably our moms.
It's
probably our moms that answered the poll.
Probably.
So we're just asking for a little bit of participation. There's no trophy for it.
We should have a question on this one.
We should give out free hoodies.
Free hoodies, 5 of them.
5 free hoodies. Out of the 8 people that listen, 5 of you
get free hoodies.
Are getting free hoodies. We don't have hoodies to give you.
But we can make them.
It's an empty promise. It's an empty promise. We can only hope.
Yes.
One day when we get in a sponsorship from Ale 8.
Hey, there we go.
Maybe we can do that.
Ale 8 would be a good one.
Oh boy. Well, hey, anyway, thanks for listening.
Yes, we do appreciate it.
You know, if you don't mind, just hit share. It's easy. It's simple. Whether it's Amazon Music or Spotify, those are usually the 2 biggest platforms.
Yep.
But if you're listening, if you would just share it like on your social media pages. But here's what we're going to ask. Pick 2 people and share it directly
to them.
Yeah. You know, they might want to start with episode 1 because we're starting to talk about stuff that don't matter about nothing right now. But anyway, if you would just pick 2 people just to directly share it, you know,
that could go.
That might help rather than just a broadcast deal. So anyway, today's topic, we're just going to warn you, we're going to get a little bit deep here. We're going to get a little deeper than we have. And
fully support it.
If you're sitting and watching, I don't know, you might, if you got a Bible, you might want to grab one.
Hey.
May not hurt. So last episode, if you listened, if you haven't, we'd encourage you to go back. But last episode, we touched on the difference between, Joel brought it up, the difference between trusting God and surrendering to Him. You know, both are good, but there is a difference. And a lot of us trust Him. We trust that He's good, but have we surrendered to His process and plan?
Yep.
And surrendered to His principles.
Very true.
And living those out. So in that discussion, we got to touching on trials. You know, trusting God, surrendering God through trials even. And then, so then we got to talking about some stuff. And that's going to drive the discussion for today is what is trials and temptations?
Yes.
A difference, and what do they look like, and what does it mean for us in the context of our lives, especially in the lives of 20-somethings, young professionals. So I ask you, Joel, to help us out here.
Definitely.
What do you think top 3 kind of temptations are that your generation, that 18 to 28, 18 to 30, maybe even, what do you think the top 3 temptations you think that they're looking at or facing or working through on a consistent basis?
I think obviously there's a lot of temptations out there that can cause a lot of issues and lead you down a couple bad rabbit holes. But I think one of the big temptations, for one, that comes to mind is that idea of, like fitting in and maybe even falling into the temptation of comparing yourself to others. Another big one I feel that really attacks, and it's been progressive over time is that idea of like pornography, that kind of stuff. I feel like that's a big one that not only men but also women can struggle with too.
Right.
And then the final one I feel is especially prominent and even in our area to be exact too, but anywhere you look is I see alcohol as a big one too. That can lead to a lot of temptations, which also leads into maybe not the most bright of decisions and can lead you into even like, sex, different things like that too.
Right.
So, I mean, I think those are 3 big ones that I feel that I notice a lot.
Well, let me ask you this on, the fitting in deal. Do you feel like it's more of a drive? Like I would say for high schoolers, the drive is fitting in.
Yes.
And I feel like as you navigate 20, 22, 23, it's less about fitting in and more about I just don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
Meaning, I may not even like this group of people.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But this is better than sitting at home by myself Friday. Right? So what is that fear of missing out?
The fear of
kind of deal.
out, yeah.
So that drives like, well, I'll do.
Whatever, I'll go out and go to.
I'll compromise just so I can have a group of people to be with. I don't necessarily like any of you.
And that's the part. Yeah. And that's the part like I mean, personally, I struggled with that too. Like I was come to a Friday night and it'd be like, oh, I have nothing going on. Okay, let's go to a bar, do something like that. But as I've gotten older, matured a little bit, you don't realize how much Friday night just to relax, how amazing that is. Let me tell you.
Well, I'll tell you what, you start to at some point, and I think the switch is different for every individual.
Yeah.
I think it comes quicker for ladies.
Yes.
That switch of being comfortable being alone.
Yeah.
Like I'm okay. I don't mind it.
Yeah.
I don't need to be entertained. I don't need something to do 24 hours of my life.
Yeah.
This is nice,
Absolutely.
But in high school, it's, not only do I want you to invite me places, but I need you to like me.
Yes. Big time.
Right. So that's where that fitting in comes in.
Yeah.
Where I think somewhere in your early 20s, you start to say, well, I don't need you to like me, but I just don't want to do stuff alone and I'm not comfortable being alone. So I'll just go with you because nobody else is asking.
Yeah. That's
right.
Yeah. Big time.
And then you look at the other 2 that you mentioned, it can grow in there,
just from that fear of being alone and missing out, stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, they've actually did recent studies. I think recent, when I say it's probably about 5 or so years ago, they came out with a study and said that they believe there's statistical proof out there now where they believe that the fear of missing out is greater than the fear of death.
Oh, yeah.
In our culture.
Yeah.
Right. And this is why we do things like look at our phones while we're driving.
Yeah.
We would rather crash our car, which looking at your phone while you're driving is worse than drunk driving. They've proven that. We do that, because we don't want to miss out on what's going on social media. So now our fear of missing out is greater than, supersedes the fear of dying in that car crash.
Which is wild.
Wild.
That is insane.
Yeah, we're crazy. It's like not even the point of today's discussion.
No, not even, but it's...
But put your phone down, dang it.
Yeah,
we should do a musical on that. Put your phone down, dang it.
That would be a great one.
Okay.
Let's
enough of that nonsense, right? I'll sing the opening number on that.
Hey, Dan.
So
stick to the point.
No, yes, stick to the point. Stick to the point. Yeah. No one wants to hear that singing. So
I think it would be good.
Okay. So let's talk about temptations and trials. Right? Because there's a difference.
There is a difference.
And a lot of times, if we're not careful, we confuse the two. And then we start to, because of our confusion, we start to think things about God that are not accurate. Yep. And we start to think things about our temptation or our trials that aren't accurate. And if we think inaccurately about all of those things, or even one piece of that puzzle, we start to make decisions based on inaccuracies. That's not good.
That's not good.
Right?
No.
So it would be the same as me believing that in baseball, I run to third base first.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you operated inaccurately based on some inaccurate information you've been given, right?
Yeah.
And so we want to make sure we're running to first base first.
Yes.
And we're doing it in order or in the process in which we see it being taught to us through Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let me give a couple things. Trials should or are intended to draw us toward God.
Toward God. Yeah.
Okay. Temptations draw us away from Him. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big, huge difference. Okay. Now, here's some bad theology, and we're going to use Scripture to kind of help us refute some of this. What you'll find is a lot of people who are good, Christ-following people, they will say this, because we have a knack for, in the Christian world, driving our faith off of memes, right? They weren't memes in the 80s and 90s, but,
Yeah.
Like these short sayings,
Yeah.
people mean well, but they're not something you build your faith on.
Yeah.
Like motivators or, motivational little sayings or whatever.
Yep.
So one of the things that we hear a lot of times, good Christians, strong in their faith, but somewhere along the lines they've been fed a lie, and we operate out of this, and that is God doesn't give you anything you can't handle.
Yeah.
Right? God only gives, God will never give you more than you're able to handle.
Yeah.
And then what we hear people say is, well, then he must really think I'm a strong Christian because look at how tough my life is right now. Right?
Yeah.
And even when you say that out loud,
It's like,
there's a little bit of arrogancy to that.
yeah.
Right? Like God must think I'm really something.
Yeah.
Because boy, he's really piling it on.
Yeah.
Right?
Big time.
So the issue is that that's taken out of context in a passage in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to read that later on.
Yep.
But I want to talk about trials first.
Deal.
So trials ought to draw me to Christ in my faith. They ought to deepen my faith. Not only that, but they ought to be evidence to those watching of my faith. Right? Mm-hmm. So let me give you a couple verses. James chapter 1, verses 2-5. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Right? Like
that's a struggle. Like you don't want, like if I'm going through a trial,
yeah,
there's going to be like, I don't really know if I want to be joyful.
When was the last time you got a piece of bad news and you were like, this is the best day ever?
Never. Never.
Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. And here's why he says that. It isn't just you should do this, but here's why. Because you know that the testing of your faith, there's the trial, right? It's drawing me, it's deepening it, it's strengthening my faith, and it's evidence of my faith. Because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance, right?
Yeah.
And let's just take a sports analogy, right?
Yeah.
You become a better athlete when you struggled a little bit.
Definitely.
Right? You won some games where you had fallen behind and had to dig yourself out, and you overcame and won at the end, right? Whether it was an overtime game, it was a close game, and now that perseverance was built
because you were tested.
Because you get tested. Right? If you go in and smoke all the teams,
you're not getting
You're not
tested.
really growing.
No, you're
right?
not.
And you hear all the time in the sports world, there are teams who will play to their competition.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you come in, you got a weaker team, and you're like the stronger team, and you're like, why are we doing so poorly? Because you played down.
Yeah.
Because you've not had anything to push
yourselves for.
Right?
Yeah.
So this trial makes you. So let perseverance finish its work so that you may mature and complete. So you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And here's the kicker in verse 5. When we talk about temptation and trials and what am I facing, what's coming at me, which one is this, right? If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. Okay, but I want to just give you a caution here, okay? If any of you lacks wisdom, God, I don't know what to do here. God, I don't know how to get out of this. God, I don't know what I'm facing, right? Even in the midst of this trial, I feel like I'm being tempted. That can happen.
Yeah.
Okay. What am I supposed to do? But here's the kicker, okay? It says this, you should ask God. So this is the problem with many of us.
I know where you're going with this.
We say things like, God, give me wisdom. That's not a request.
No.
That's a demand. Right?
Yeah.
So it very specifically says, ask him for wisdom. So that should sound like, God, will you please give me wisdom in this? I'm not demanding it of him, but I am genuinely asking, will you please give me wisdom to help me make wise choices here? And he will give it.
And just in the simple way of how you phrase that, it's completely different.
Completely different.
Completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Big time.
So then, if we go to James 1:12, just a little further down, it says, blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. Okay, now I want to give you a couple things about that. That is a reward-based promise that when you persevere under trial, you are blessed. Why? Now listen, because here's the reward. It is called the crown of life. That's a real thing. And you receive that when you step foot into eternity with Christ.
With Christ, okay.
You don't get that here. That's not an earthly reward. You know, you may get through trial and no one ever may notice. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody knows the struggle or the battle, but you're going to walk it, and you're going to fight through it, you're going to get it in God's strength and God's wisdom.
Yeah.
And then he says, when you persevere through your trials, one day, as a believer, you will close your eyes here on this earth, open them, and face Christ, and you will receive, he will put on your head the crown of life as a reward. Well done. Right? I'll go to whatever battle you need me to go through.
Yep.
You know, that kind of deal.
Send me.
But let me give you one more set of passages. 1 Peter 1, verses 3 and 7. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish. You know, so we talked about stick to the point. Can't move and it can't be taken away. Right?
Yeah.
So your salvation, if you genuinely have professed Christ, it cannot be taken away. Okay?
Yeah.
It can never perish, spoil, or fade. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Okay. So through your faith, you are shielded by God's power as a believer in Christ. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Verse 6. In all of this, you greatly rejoice. In all of what? In all of what we just read. That was all the promises.
Yeah.
That first set of passages, verse 3, 4, and 5, it's just promises. Here's what you have to look forward to. Here's how God is protecting you right now. So in all of this, you should greatly rejoice. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Well, because in James 1, it says, consider it pure joy.
Yeah.
When you face trials. Why? Because 1 Peter says, I have all this to rejoice in. Okay?
There's so much.
I'm not rejoicing in the trial. I'm rejoicing in what God's doing through it and what he's showing me, and right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm rejoicing. Now listen what he says. He says, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed. In all of this, you greatly rejoice. Now here it is. Though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. These have come. What are these? The trials.
The trials.
Right. The trials have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, that's why the trial's there, right?
Yeah.
It is to deepen me. It is to deepen my love for Christ. It is to deepen my understanding of Christ. But it is also to show the evidence of the genuineness of my faith. How many people do you know walk away from their faith because they went through a little bit of a trial?
A lot.
Right? God doesn't care. God ignores.
God's not listening.
Right.
He's not listening to my prayers or something like that. Yeah.
Right. And we'll get into that. But he says this, the proven genuineness of your faith, which is of greater worth than gold, your faith is, which perishes, that's the gold, even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed.
Well,
consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds, because it will produce perseverance, and it will produce the praise, glory, and honor of Jesus Christ. Okay?
Yeah.
That's a trial.
That's a trial.
And so when we walk through those, and I said this in our last episode, the trial is not what we're going through, right?
No.
Whether I lose a loved one, bad news from the doctor, flat tire, fail a class.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even not fail it, but get to a class that's tougher than it. Let's be honest. I mean, my toughest class in college was walking. I'm not kidding you. We were required to take a physical fitness
walking class.
And I could have taken ballroom dancing or walking.
And you chose walking.
I chose walking for the simplicity of it. And it was a first-year teacher who was out to prove himself. And it was horrible. It was horrible, right? Like we were in every Wednesday measuring body fat. It was bad. It was bad.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So, but we get into a class and we're like, this is done, right?
Yeah.
That's not the trial. The trial's not the professor. The trial is not the boss. Maybe you're at work. The trial's not the coworker you just can't stand.
Yeah, it's
the trial is how are you going to push through it?
How are you going to persevere?
Persevere. Am I going to consider this joy?
Or am I going to have a completely different mindset of it?
Right?
Yeah.
And if, in preaching last Sunday, we talked about finding purpose in our struggles.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
That's our trial. Right? The trial, am I going to be the person of God in this, even in the midst of this?
Yeah.
I'm going to have moments where I'm going to break down. Right?
Definitely.
It's just going to get the better of me.
It's going to happen.
Right? I mean, it's just going to, and at some point we'll do an episode over my last year and the trials that, me and my family have walked through in that. At some point we'll do that,
Yeah.
But in the midst of that, you gotta, and so we have these trials in our lives, right? And what Christ is doing in the midst of those, I think he's going to do what he's going to do.
Yeah.
But there's oftentimes I think we miss out on what he desires because we don't want him or we don't allow him to do what he wants to do in us through those.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree with you on that.
And so in the midst of a trial, what we ought to be doing is grabbing a hold of the anchor, who is Jesus.
Yes.
He doesn't move. He's the same. He is not surprised by that trial. He's not caught off guard.
No.
So we hang on to him. We dig in deeper. And I'll be honest, and I've shared this with a lot of, students, and there were some tough trials even early in my ministry at, churches that I've been at. And I'll tell you, the thing that got me through was not 2-hour-long prayers. It wasn't a sermon. It was sitting in my car by myself listening to worship music.
Yeah.
Right? Chris Tomlin had come on the scene then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How great is our God? All of those kind of.
Yeah.
And so, I remember just being in a car and like, this is kicking my rear end,
mm-hmm.
and worship being the thing that brought me through those kind of gives you like, okay, it's kicking my rear end, but I'm going to go do it again.
I'm going to fight fight like crazy for it.
Get your shield up and go at it, right?
Put on the full armor. That's a good one.
So what we find is in the midst of trials,
we turn,
right? We have people say, well, God never gives you more than you can handle.
Yeah.
And this is a lie.
Yeah.
This is a flat out lie that's been twisted and taken out of context. I don't think 99% of people know it. I don't think 99% of people mean harm by it. It's a great motivator, right?
Yeah.
But but on the receiving end of that, right? I've had people tell me that, and I would say, then you don't know how heavy this is.
You don't know the burden that's weighing.
Right? So something's not adding up in my head.
Yeah.
Well, what you find is that the passage that we get that from is actually 1 Corinthians.
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to read this one to you. And as we transition into talking about temptations, but listen to this. If you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind. What does that mean? That means everybody is tempted.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody.
So you aren't the only one.
Yeah.
You aren't the only one that's even gone through a trial.
Yeah.
You're not the only one that's gone through the specific trial that you're going through.
Yeah.
Right? You're telling me, how many people are in our world?
Billions.
And you're telling me the only one? You're the only one, right?
Definitely.
Right? Like, and that's what the enemy wants to tell you. Hey, look, you don't need to talk to anybody about this because nobody's going to understand.
He tries to isolate you.
Yeah. Nobody's ever dealt with pornography. You're the only one.
Nobody's ever dealt with
alcoholism.
Yeah, you're the only one.
Yeah. Nobody's ever failed this class before. Nobody's ever had an issue with that boss. And I want to tell you, yes, they have.
Yeah.
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have. It's
right.
Yeah.
That's what Paul's telling us. No temptation is overtaking you except what is common to mankind. And that's what he says. And God is faithful. Now here it is. You ready? He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear.
There it is.
It has nothing to do with trial.
No, it's the complete opposite.
So, can you and will you in life face things that are more than you could bear alone?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Will you face things that are not fair? Yes.
Yes.
Will you face things that you never thought you'd ever have to face?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely you will. But will you be tempted more than you can bear? No.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Right? No, you will not. God will not. As a believer in Christ, you will not be tempted more than what you can fight or bear against. Okay, now listen to what he says, because here's the kicker. But when you are tempted, God, will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Okay?
Yeah.
So what does that mean for us? That means when I say God will not let you be tempted more than you can bear it, and we say, well, that's not true because I fall into temptation. Okay, but you didn't take his escape plan.
Yeah.
He told you to walk away from that bedroom.
Yeah.
He told you to turn the phone off. He told you to put the phone down. He told you to not go to that party. And you ignored the escape plan and fell into temptation.
And that brings up that idea of we have the choice.
That's right.
We have the choice to make we are the ones single-handedly that make the decision.
And the choice is not, will I do this or do not do that thing? The choice is, will I surrender to God?
Yep.
Or not?
Or not, yeah.
That's the choice.
Yeah.
I trust him. Okay, but are you going to surrender to him in this decision, which is what we talked about last time?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so this is all full circle, right? So you have trials. These are things, like stuff's going to happen. And so I have a trial in my life. Okay, am I going to be susceptible to being upset, angry, bitter about it, complaining? Or am I going to find purpose in it?
Yeah.
Is the trial going to be, am I just going to be discouraged? Am I going to play the victim card? Become Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh?
Oh, Pooh.
Oh, Pooh, right?
Yeah.
Oh, poor, pitiful me, right?
Yeah.
That's the trial.
That is the trial.
Am I going to give up? Am I going to walk away from my faith because I believed lies? God doesn't love me. God doesn't care. He's not watching me. Yes, he is.
Yeah,
None of that's true. And then you got temptation. And these are given and introduced into our life directly from the enemy with one sole purpose. And John 10:10 tells us the purpose. It says this: the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy you.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
New Testament also tells us that the enemy prowls around like a lion, seeking who he can devour.
Mm-hmm.
right? These are not images. It's very deliberate. These are not images of nicety. These are not images of passivity.
No.
The enemy is out to kill and destroy your faith, your morale, your integrity, your character, your future, your purpose in Christ.
It's an all-out attack.
One purpose, one sole focus in your life. That's what he is. And so he introduces temptations into your life. Okay? But they're never greater than you can bear, and God always gives you an escape plan.
Yep.
Okay? Now listen to what James says. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. Okay, now, I know some of you who are familiar with Scripture will say, well, wait a minute, because that says God cannot be tempted, but we go back to the New Testament, we see where Jesus was.
Mm-hmm.
So I need you to read or hear this differently. God is not susceptible to temptation. Okay?
Yes.
And we're going to make another episode. Our next episode is going to walk through the temptation of Christ.
Sweet.
We're going to look at that.
Yes.
And says, verse 14, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Each person is tempted when they are dragged away and they neglect to take God's escape plan. Okay?
Yeah.
There's this desire. Man, I want that. Man, I want to, yes, I want to do that. And God's going, red flag, don't do it. Get out. Look, you can say no, call them back. Don't get in that car. Don't do, right?
Yeah.
But we just say, well, we got dragged away by our own evil desire and we were enticed. Now listen what he says. And then after desire has conceived, we act on that desire. It gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death. Okay, now listen, I want to give you a couple of things. This is very familiar to what God told Adam and Eve in the garden in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
Here's two trees. This one you can eat from. This one you don't touch. If you eat from this tree, you will surely die. It wasn't a physical death. Now, in some sense it was.
Yeah.
Because in the original creation, when God originally created, death was not part of that plan.
Yeah.
We were to live forever. And so when he says you will surely die, it was a spiritual death, but then the decay of all creation began. So it was, longevity. But I want you to see this in James 15. After desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. James gives the exact description of how we would describe a stillborn birth. I want you to think of how dramatic that is. Right?
Yeah.
And what we've allowed our culture to do is we downplay sin, right? We downplay falling into, it's just no big deal, right? Nobody was hurt. Well, what God's saying, no, listen, this is huge. This ought to be traumatic.
Yeah.
This is disrupting and dividing and decaying our relationship with one another. Yeah. As long as you allow this to continue and live in your life, it is decaying our relationship with one another, right?
Yeah, big time.
And so we have temptation, draws us, the sole purpose to steal, kill, and destroy us from the enemy. You have trials that if we will allow it, if we will find purpose in it, it will pull us towards Christ. And so there's a vast difference.
Big time.
Can our trials become heavier than what we can? Yes, right? That's the importance of a good church. That's the importance of a good circle, a small group, of friends that help build and keep that morale, help us persevere, and help us to see the purpose in the midst of that.
Yeah.
And then you have the temptations that really draw us away from there, right?
Really put the wedge in.
So let me ask, we've talked about temptation. What are some what are some things that we see facing kind of your generation, this younger, the 18, the young professionals? What are some
trials that we face?
Finances, right? Like
financially, you can think of trials like, well, you're going to eventually have to buy a house,
pay off your school
loans, do things like that. But also you get into that idea of like, well, you may face trials with your relationships. Like, whether they're dating, whether they're friendships.
Moving at the same pace.
Yeah.
Moving
depending on the pace you're going and everything like that.
One thing I hear a lot of, younger folks, I sound like I'm 80, don't I? Folks.
You
young snappers.
You youngins.
Whippersnappers. Is just the idea of when you look at the world collectively, like how are we ever going to be able to afford to be in a house?
Yeah.
How are we ever going to afford some of these dreams that our parents, because things are expensive right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's become kind of one of those trials that feels insurmountable. Like I got these dreams and I just don't know.
Yeah. Agreed. I would agree with that. I think those are some of the big ones though. Like that financial aspect of things, like how am I going to overcome this debt?
Right.
How am I going to overcome even, like losing maybe this family member, like something like along those lines, like you talked about, like,
right.
Like somebody that plays a big factor in your life.
Yeah.
Like, how am I going to overcome this?
Well, and even for those that chose to take a career on trade, or just,
definitely.
And I don't think we appreciate those that made that decision enough.
I completely agree with you.
I think college is overpraised.
I do too.
I think both are valuable, but I think we just dismiss those. But, even that, the trial is like, well, I'm not making a whole lot here, right? I'm working my rear end off. I don't know if I want to go to work tomorrow because they're not paying me a whole lot and I'm working my rear end off. That's a trial.
Yeah, that's a big time.
Or how do I work my way up?
Yeah.
To get to a position that I want. Those are all kind of those things there. And so, that's the thing is it's just and I know it's cliche, right? The preacher says, oh, you just need to pray more. And I'm not saying that, but I am saying is that you cling to Christ a little more. You surround yourself with some good people.
Yeah.
Some Christ following people that can help you just navigate all that. And I think that's important.
And I feel, and personally, I've even noticed that tremendously, just that idea of people may see it as a cliche, but I'll tell somebody something that's taken place and I've literally been told have you prayed about it?
Yeah.
Have you talked to God about it?
Right.
No, I haven't.
Right.
And
we do, right? We treat prayer as well, I guess all I have left to do is pray. And
it's not your last resort. It shouldn't be your last resort.
Right.
It should be your first.
Yes.
Because, even in the Bible, it talks about in Philippians, do not worry or don't be anxious about anything, but through prayer and petition.
With thanksgiving.
Present your worries and your requests to God.
Yep.
That's something I've tried tackling big time.
Right.
Anytime I have an anxious thought, I'm instantly I could be driving, have my radio on and I have an anxious thought. I turn it down and I'm like, all right, here it is. I'm not going to let this eat me for the rest of my day.
Yeah. Because it'll ruin a day.
It will.
Yep.
It will. And it's not worth.
Right.
It's not worth when you can just hand it over.
Yeah.
So
I think that's good stuff. Well, in closing, Psalm 121, David writes this: I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that speaks to what you just said there. We want to look everywhere else first. And what I think we're doing is we're looking for somebody to give us the answer we want, not what we need.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't like what you said. Well, you were no help.
Yeah.
And then ultimately we come to our senses and say, wait a minute, all those people were trying to help me because they love me.
Yeah.
But ultimately at the end of the day, David comes to realization man, I've been looking everywhere else for help. And my realization is this: my help doesn't come from anyone or any other thing. It comes from the maker of heaven and earth.
He's the one that will provide.
Yeah. And if you go read the rest of Psalm 121, it's solid. And I would encourage you to do that. But just come to that realization that my help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. That's good stuff.
That's amazing stuff.
Joel, thanks for coming back.
I appreciate the invite.
Thanks for listening. And again, we're going to have a poll. We're going to try this again. We're going to have a poll. I don't know what the question's going to be. All you got to do is it's literally right under the podcast if you're on Spotify. It's only on Spotify.
Yeah.
Maybe we have thousands of listeners, but they're all on Amazon.
And we're not checking.
We're not checking.
We probably need to be better.
Yeah. I doubt that's true, but we can be hopeful. We're being hopeful.
Hopeful.
Just scroll down, answer the poll below. That helps us out. Leave a comment. If you just do a comment, that's a help too. We really would appreciate that. And pick 2 people that you can share it directly to, and maybe it'll encourage them. Maybe it'll help them. Maybe it'll challenge them.
That's all we can ask for.
Thanks again, Joel, for being on.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Thanks for listening, and that's all the time we have for now.